The claiming court of Veldmore convened once each winter, on the night of the Iron Moon. That was the rule, and the rule had held for 230 years. I had presided over 9 of those nights. I had watched my pack mistress call the names from the registry, watched the candidates stand in the candlelight, watched my wolf feel precisely nothing, and then I had returned to my war table and told myself that 9 more years would pass in exactly the same way. I believed that completely until the night Riva of the River Valley refused to kneel. Let me tell you how the court ran. Vara, my pack mistress, a woman who had managed ceremony in Veldmore since before my father's time, handled the logistics with the precision of a tax collector. The candidates were drawn from every pack holding within 3 territories: daughters of allied bloodlines, daughters of ranking families, daughters whose fathers had paid the registration fee. They were ranked by standing before they entered the hall. The highest standing candidates came first. They stood in the torchlight. I looked, my wolf felt nothing, and they were escorted to the east wing to wait. The lowest standing candidates came last. They always did, and for them, Vara had a different procedure, the dismissal right. She called it the submission of the court. The candidate was brought to the center of the floor, the torches to her left and right, and Vara stood before her and said, very pleasantly, "The claiming court has reviewed your standing. You are free to return home. Please kneel before the court and accept the court's formal release, and we will conclude your registration." They always knelt. It was a formality. Vara was not cruel about it. She was simply efficient. The low-standing candidates knelt. The court gave a polite murmur, and they were gone by midnight. No harm was done. That was the story I had told myself for 9 years. The last name on the Iron Moon roster was Riva. No family name, no pack affiliation. Vara had shown me the entry 2 weeks before the ceremony, with the look she reserved for administrative irregularities. A slight tightening at the corners of her eyes, a pause before she spoke. "There is a name on the old border registry," she had said. "A girl from the River Valley settlements. Her father registered her before he died, 11 years ago. She is 24. She has no wolf on record." I had looked at the entry and looked away. "She is entitled to attend," I said. "The registry is binding." That was all I gave it. A name on a paper, a formality to process at the end of the night. That is all it was supposed to be. The hall was warm for a winter ceremony. Veldmore's great stone hall held its heat well when the iron braziers burned at full height, and that night every brazier was lit. The torches ran in 2 columns from the entry doors to the foot of the dais where I sat, and the pack stood in formation to either side. Senior wolves at the front, the newer members toward the back, the court staff along the eastern wall. At my right shoulder stood my captain, Bryn. At my left, Mara. Mara was the reason I had presided over 9 claiming courts without growing impatient. She was the oldest wolf in Veldmore. Older than the hold itself, some said. Though Bryn called that an exaggeration with the gentle skepticism he reserved for things he was not entirely sure were untrue. She was gray from muzzle to flank, moving slowly now, her great head low, her amber eyes still and considering. She had been my grandfather's wolf before she was the pack's, and she had been the pack's for decades since. What she chose on a night like this mattered more than anything I thought or said. In 9 Iron Moon ceremonies, she had not moved from my left shoulder. She had not chosen anyone in 9 years. The high-standing candidates came and went. I watched them as I was supposed to watch them, with the full attention the ceremony required. My wolf, my own wolf, the one that lived behind my ribs and had been silent since the year I was 31, gave nothing, no pull, no recognition, nothing that even resembled interest. I sat in the ceremony chair and felt the familiar flatness settle over the proceedings, and I waited for the night to end. Then Vara called the low-standing names. There were 3 of them that year. 2 knelt without hesitation, 1 with relief, I thought, as though the formality of the dismissal freed her from something she had already known. The second knelt with dignity and a quiet chin, and I respected her for it. They were escorted out, and the hall shifted, the way halls do when a long event draws toward its close. Shoulders eased. Someone near the back wall coughed quietly. The torches had burned lower. "Final registration," Vara said. "Riva of the Fen Hollow Settlements, Border Registry of the Eastern Valley." She came through the entry doors. She was not what I expected. I have thought about this since, what I expected. And the answer is, I do not know. I had not given the name on the paper any particular shape, But when the doors opened and she walked the length of the torchlit corridor toward the center of the floor, I registered her the way you register a thing that does not fit the pattern you have been holding. She was not in ceremony dress. She wore a dark wool traveling cloak over a plain gray gown, and the cloak was good wool but not fine, and the gown was clean and carefully pressed in a way that said she had pressed it herself and taken care over it. Her hair was dark and pinned back with the practical efficiency of someone who works with her hands. She was not adorned. She wore no ornament at her throat, no ceremony brooch, nothing that announced itself. She walked the corridor the way people walk when they are not performing, steadily, without pause, looking forward. The hall did not laugh yet. That came later. She stopped in the center of the floor, in the space between the two torch columns where the candidates always stopped, and she stood still and looked at Vara, and Vara looked at her the way Vara looked at anything that required processing, and said, pleasantly and with complete procedural precision, "Riva of the Fen Hollow Settlements. The claiming court has reviewed your standing. You are free to return home." A pause, exactly as calibrated as every pause Vara made. "Please kneel before the court and accept the formal release." I was watching Riva's face. I do not know when I had stopped watching Vara and started watching Riva instead. It was not a decision I made. My attention had simply moved, the way attention moves when something shifts in a room and the body understands it before the mind does. Riva looked at Vara. Then she looked, slowly, at the floor in front of her. The cold stone floor. The same floor the other two had knelt on. Then she looked back up. "No," she said. I heard it clearly. The hall heard it clearly. And for 3 full seconds, nobody did anything, because it was the word that had never been said in this room, in 9 years of claiming courts, and nobody had prepared a response to it. Then the hall laughed. It started at the back, a few snorts, quickly joined by the confident amusement of the middle ranks, and then the pack's laughter settled into the room, like something that had always planned to be there. Someone near the east wall said something low to the person beside them, and the person beside them smiled and nodded. Vara's face did not change. She had the particular stillness of a woman deciding which procedural lever to pull. I did not laugh. Something was happening behind my ribs. I had 9 years of familiarity with the silence that lived behind my ribs. I knew every texture of it, and what was happening now was not silence. It was more like the moment before something that has been still for a very long time remembers that it can move. Not a noise, not yet, just a shift in the quality of the stillness, a loosening. A first slow breath after an inhalation held too long. I looked at Riva. She was still standing. She had not moved in response to the laughter, had not flushed, had not smiled in the conciliatory way people smile when they have done something that surprised them and want to smooth it over. She simply stood, feet even, hands at her sides, and looked at Vara and waited. Vara found her lever. "I understand," she said, with the precision of someone tightening a screw, "that traveling from the border settlements is a long journey. The court appreciates your attendance. But the procedure is clear. A formal release requires the candidate's acknowledgement. If you prefer," a small pause that was not a kindness, "you may kneel briefly and be on your way before the cold sets back in." "I have ridden 7 hours through the cold to get here," Riva said. "I am aware the cold is in." The laughter from the back of the hall sharpened. I heard it take on a different note, less amusement now, and more of the particular edge that forms when a crowd senses something is not going the expected direction and chooses a side. "The procedure exists for a reason," Vara said. "I'm sure it does," Riva said. "But the reason isn't my pride, and kneeling on your stone floor in front of a court that has already decided I'm nobody isn't an acknowledgement. It's a performance. For whose benefit exactly?" Silence. This kind of silence was different from the laughter. It fell suddenly and completely, the way silences fall when the room has not decided yet whether to be affronted or held. I stood up. I did not plan to stand up. I had sat through 9 Iron Moon ceremonies in that chair without once standing before the formal conclusion, and now I was on my feet and Bryn was looking at me with the careful expression he wore when he was doing his best not to show surprise, and the hall had gone very still, because the Alpha King standing mid-ceremony was not part of any procedure Vara had a lever for. She turned to look at me. Her eyes said, "I am managing this." I walked down the 3 steps of the dais. I am telling this the way it happened, not the way it makes sense in retrospect. At the time, I would not have been able to explain what I was doing. My wolf, the thing that had been silent for 9 years, was not silent anymore. It was not howling. It was not surging or pulling in the theatrical way I had heard older wolves describe the recognition. It was doing something quieter, and in some ways, more alarming. It was paying attention. The focused, complete attention of a creature that has finally seen what it has been looking for and is very careful not to move too fast. I walked to the center of the floor. The corridor of torches was to my left and right. Riva was in front of me. Up close she was, I noticed, cataloging the fact without knowing what to do with it, looking at me without performance. Not with fear, not with calculation, not with the angled presentation of a woman who knows she is being assessed. She looked at me the way she had looked at Vara, straight, and with the particular quality of attention that belongs to people who are genuinely trying to understand a thing and not trying to appear as though they understand it. She was, I realized, more tired than she had looked from the dais. 7 hours through the snow was 7 hours through the snow. You rode 7 hours, I said. Yes. In winter. The roads were passable, she said. Mostly. Why? She held my gaze. Because my father registered me on this roster 11 years ago. He died before I was old enough for the ceremony. I didn't know until his things were sorted. It seemed a pause. Not a hesitation, exactly. More like she was choosing a word with the same care she had pressed her gown with. Right to come. He went to some trouble over the registration. He believed in doing the thing you said you'd do. I looked at her for a moment. Then I said, and you don't believe in kneeling. Not in front of a court that has already made up its mind, she said. No. Most people would consider that the wiser choice, I said, in a room full of wolves. Something moved in her face. Not quite a smile, but its outline. Most people, she said, didn't ride 7 hours to be told to kneel, so they could go home. Behind me, I heard Bryn make a sound that was not quite a cough. I turned back to look at the hall. The pack was watching with the concentrated attention of an audience that has stopped knowing what kind of story it is watching. Vara stood to my left with her hands folded and her face arranged into the expression she wore when she was recalculating. Along the eastern wall, the court staff had gone very still. The senior wolves at the front were looking at me with the specific, focused quiet of wolves who understand that something is being decided. I turned back to Riva. There is a custom, I said, that predates the dismissal procedure. Vara will confirm this. I did not look at Vara. A candidate who is present in this hall during the ceremony is entitled to remain for the full duration of the claiming night, until the iron moon sets. That entitlement belongs to the registry, not the court's review. You are registered, you may stay. Vara said, in the tone of someone acknowledging a fact while reserving the right to be displeased about it. That is correct. I went back to the dais. I sat down. I looked at the floor for a moment, and then at the hall, and then at Riva, who had turned slightly and was now standing at the edge of the torch-lit corridor, near the western wall, with no place formally assigned to her and no escort, which meant she simply stood there, not conspicuously, not with any claim to the room, and waited. My wolf was still paying attention. The remaining procedure of the claiming night took 40 minutes. The high-standing candidates who had waited in the East Wing were summoned back, one by one, for the formal conclusion of the assessment, the part of the ceremony where I was supposed to make a choice or confirm a continuation, and where, for 9 straight years, I had confirmed a continuation. The candidates came and stood, and I looked, and my wolf was quiet. I confirmed the continuation. They were escorted back to the East Wing. The formal record was noted by the court scribe. Vara moved through the conclusion with the same precision she moved through everything, calling each step, marking each response. And through all of it, I was aware, in the way you are aware of a sound that continues through many other sounds, of Riva standing near the western wall with her hands at her sides. When the formal procedure concluded, the hall did not immediately empty. The pack moved into the informal gathering that always followed the claiming night. Low conversation. The braziers built back up, wine brought from the kitchen corridor. The candidates from the East Wing were given a formal send-off and escorted to their quarters. The court staff dispersed. Vara approached me at the dais with her record book and we exchanged the necessary administrative words, and she left. I sat in the ceremony chair in the warming hall and looked at the western wall. Riva had not left. She was standing near the furthest brazier, at the edge of the gathering, not in conversation with anyone, because no one had approached her, and she had not attempted to approach anyone. She held a cup of the wine the staff had brought around, and she was looking at the brazier with the composed expression of someone who has decided to be exactly where they are. Mara moved. I felt it before I saw it, a shift beside my left shoulder, the great gray wolf's weight distributing differently, her head coming up. In 9 years, Mara had not moved during a claiming night. I knew every position she held during the ceremony. I knew the exact angle of her head, the precise placement of her paws, the way she moved now, quietly, without urgency, but with the absolute certainty of a creature who knows exactly where it is going, was something I had never seen. She went down the 3 steps of the dais. She crossed the hall floor. The pack moved without being asked, opening a path without drama, the way wolves move when they understand something is happening that is larger than their opinion of it. The conversation in the hall dropped and then stopped. Bryn, standing near the entry doors, went very still. Mara walked to the western wall. She walked to the furthest brazier. She walked to Riva. And she lay down at her feet. Riva looked down at her. Her expression did not perform. She did not gasp, did not look at the room to check how the room was receiving this, did not reach to touch the wolf immediately in the studied way of someone performing warmth. She simply looked at Mara for a moment, and then she slowly lowered herself to one knee, not the submission Vara had asked for, nothing procedural, and she reached out and laid her hand on Mara's gray head, and Mara's amber eyes closed. The hall was absolutely quiet. I do not know how long it was quiet, long enough that the quality of it changed, stopped being stunned silence and became something else, the particular held stillness that precedes the recognition of something true. Then the mark burned. It came on my right wrist first, under the cuff of my winter coat, and it was not pain, it was heat, deep and precise, the exact heat of something completing a circuit that had been open for 9 years. I looked down and pulled the cuff back, and the mark was there on my skin, blazing gold in the torchlight. 3 interlocked arcs, and the beginning of a 4th. The full Veldmore mark, which the pack's oldest records described as the sign of the true Luna bond, which had not appeared on an alpha's wrist in living memory. I looked at it for a moment. Across the hall, Riva was looking at her own wrist. She had pulled the sleeve of her gown back and she was looking at her left wrist with the expression of someone in the middle of understanding something very large. The same mark was there on her skin, golden, exact, the 3 interlocked arcs completing themselves as I watched. She looked up from it and found me. Her face was different now, still composed, still the expression of someone who was trying genuinely to understand a thing, but underneath that something quieter, as though a question she had been carrying for 24 years had just received an answer she had not expected to be true. I came down from the dais again. This time I did not think about why. The pack moved aside for me, the same way they had moved for Mara. I walked across the hall and stood before her, and Mara was still at her feet, and the mark on my wrist was still warm. I looked at Riva and she looked at me, and neither of us said anything for a moment, because there was a lot that needed to be said, and we both understood it needed to be said correctly. You should know, I said, what this is. I think I know what it is, she said. Tell me, I said. She looked at the mark on her wrist and then at me. A mate bond, she said. The Veldmore bond. I've read about it. Not commonly, but I've read. A pause. The kind that doesn't ask first. It asks, I said. That's one of the things I need you to understand. It asked 9 years ago, and I didn't hear it because I wasn't looking at you yet. It has been asking every year of that silence. I looked at her. It is asking you now, and the answer is yours to give. She was quiet. Not the quiet of someone performing consideration, the quiet of someone actually considering. I came here, she said finally, because my father made a promise, and I wanted to keep it for him. I didn't come here expecting. She stopped, started again. I didn't come here expecting to be anything other than the last name on the list. You were the last name on the list, I said. You are also the only name that mattered. How do you know that? She said. Not a challenge, a real question. I looked at the mark on my wrist. Because Mara has been lying at my left shoulder for 9 years, I said, and tonight she walked away from me for the first time. She chose before I did. She generally does. Something shifted in Riva's face. She looked down at Mara, who had not moved, and something in her expression softened in the way that does not perform. She's beautiful, she said. She has opinions, I said. She has them strongly, and she is not apologetic about them. Good, Riva said. I respect that. The hall was still silent behind me. I had not looked at the pack, at Vara, at Bryn, at any of the court that was watching this exchange from 6 meters away. I was aware of them the way you are aware of weather. Present, factual, irrelevant to the question being asked. I am not going to make you kneel, I said. I want to be clear about that. The dismissal procedure was wrong. It has been wrong for 9 years, and I knew it, and allowed it because it was efficient, and I am going to have to answer to that. But tonight I am asking you, not the court, not the procedure, not on behalf of any requirement, whether you will stay in Veldmore as my Luna. She looked at me for a long moment. If I say yes, she said, what does that mean? Practically. I found that question unreasonably steadying. Practically, I said, it means you would live in Veldmore. You would sit in the council chamber and hear the decisions before they are made, and tell me when you think I am wrong. You would have the East Wing's resources at your disposal. You would— I stopped. What do you do? In the settlements. I'm a herbalist, she said. I have a practice. I treat the valley families. There is a healing hall in the East Wing, I said. It is managed by Aldrich, who is competent but stretched thin and has been asking for a second practitioner for 3 years. You would be doing him an enormous favor. She looked at me. The outline of a smile was back, closer to the real thing now. You're trying to make it practical, she said. I am trying to give you reasons beyond the bond, I said. The bond is real. I want you to know that. But I don't want it to be the only reason you say yes. Riva looked at her wrist for a moment. Then she looked at Mara. Then she looked at me. My practice in the valley, she said. I have a girl who assists me. She's been with me 4 years. She's good. We can bring her, I said, if she wants to come. She'll want to come, Riva said. She has been wanting to come somewhere for some time. She's 21 and the valley is small. A pause. My father's house. I've been maintaining it. It should go to someone who will live in it, not sit empty. That can be arranged, I said. And I am not, she said, with a precision that was not sharp but was very clear, going to be managed by the pack mistress. No, I said, you are not. She looked at me steadily. Yes, she said. I'll stay. I said nothing for a moment. I was aware of the mark on my wrist, warm and present, and of the quiet that had settled behind my ribs. Not the old silence, not the familiar flatness of 9 years, but something different. The quality of a thing set down that you had been carrying so long you had forgotten it had weight. I reached into my coat and took out the cloak I wore for ceremony. Heavy dark wool, lined with wolf fur. The mark of the Alpha King of Veldmore woven in silver at the collar, and I set it over her shoulders. She was still kneeling beside Mara. The cloak fell around her, and Mara's eyes opened and she looked at both of us with the amber serenity of a creature who has done what she came to do. I offered Riva my hand to rise. She took it and stood, and the mark on her wrist was next to the mark on mine, and the warmth between them was steady and certain, the way warmth is when it is not performing. I turned to face the hall. The pack was silent. Every wolf, every court member, every senior rank and every new face, all of them had the particular stillness of people who have just watched something happen that rearranges their understanding of the evening. Along the eastern wall, I saw the court staff. I saw Bryn, who was looking at me with the expression he wore when he was doing his best not to show emotion, and was not entirely succeeding. I saw the court scribe, who had stopped writing and was simply watching. I saw Vara. She stood near the base of the dais, her record book in her hands, and her face had done something I had not seen it do in my 10 years of working with her. It had gone very quiet, not hostile, not cold, simply quiet, in the way of a face that is in the middle of understanding that something it had managed perfectly efficiently for 9 years had been, from the beginning, wrong. This is Riva of Finhollow, I said. My voice carried in the stone hall, the way voices do when there is nothing else competing with them. She is my fated mate. The Veldmore bond has found her, and she has chosen to stay. I looked at the hall. The Iron Moon ceremony is concluded. The silence held for one more breath. Then Bryn bowed. A formal, full bow. Hand on his chest. The bow of a captain acknowledging a Luna. And behind him the pack moved, one after another in rippling sequence, the way wolves move when the signal is true and understood. The senior ranks first, then the middle, then the back. The court staff at the eastern wall, the court scribe, the kitchen stewards who had been standing near the corridor door, and then Vara. She did not bow with drama. She bowed with the contained precision of a woman who has done everything correctly tonight by her own standards and is now adjusting those standards. A single, correct bow. When she straightened, she looked at Riva with the expression she reserved for new facts that required incorporation. Riva, beside me, was watching the hall bow and seemed to be taking it in with the same quality of attention she brought to everything. Careful, real, not performed. "Is this?" she started, quietly, so only I could hear. "Yes," I said, "this is what it looks like." "The whole hall," she said. "The whole hall." She was quiet for a moment. "The woman with the record book," she said. "Vara." "Yes." "She's going to be difficult," Riva said. "Not malicious, but difficult." "She is extremely good at her work," I said, "and she has never been wrong before, so this will require adjustment." "She and I will figure it out," Riva said. I looked at her. "I'm not easy to manage," she said, "but I'm not unreasonable. There's a difference." "Yes," I said, "there is." Mara had risen from the floor and was now standing at Riva's left side, her great gray head at Riva's hip, and Riva had set her hand on Mara's head without looking down, the way you set your hand on something you are already beginning to recognize as yours. We walked back to the dais together, the three of us, myself, Riva, and Mara, and the hall parted for us, and the torches were burning lower now, the iron moon night drawing toward its close, and Veldmore's great stone hold held its warmth around us, which it had always done, which I had never noticed the way I noticed it now. I showed Riva the east wing that night, before the fires were banked. I showed her the healing hall, the long room with its ranked shelves and its northern window light, the stone work table that Aldrich had covered with 3 years' worth of organized notes and labeled jars. She walked the length of it slowly, looking at the shelves, picking up a jar here and there and reading the label, and setting it back with the careful precision of a practitioner assessing a colleague's system. She asked 2 specific questions about the supply lines from the Valley network, and I answered them, and she made a small sound that was not quite satisfaction, but was close to it. "Aldrich," she said, setting down the last jar, "tell me about him." "He is 29, I said. "He has been managing this hall alone for 4 years. He is good with the wolves and with the pack's children, but he has no patience for his own limits. He tries to treat too many cases without rest. I know that kind of person," she said, with something in her voice that suggested she had been one. "He will be glad of you," I said. "He'll be annoyed of me first," she said. "People who manage alone for 4 years are always annoyed when someone comes in with opinions about the jar arrangement." She paused. "Then they'll be glad." I sat down on the bench near the northern window, and she sat across from me, and Mara settled at the foot of the bench between us, and the room was quiet except for the small sounds a winter hold makes when the night is advanced and the fires are low. "Your father," I said. "Tell me about him." She looked at the northern window. Outside the glass, the iron moon was setting, the pale cold disk of it sliding toward the western ridge, the sky beginning to lighten at the horizon, in the particular way it lightens before the real dark of the deep winter night. "He was a practical man," she said, "not a dreamer. He didn't come from pack people. He was a settlement herbalist, same as me, and he married my mother, who was settlement-born, and they had a small life in Finhollow, and they were content in it." A pause. "But he believed in the formalities, in the things that said, 'You are real, this counts. I went to the trouble of registering you because you are worth the trouble.'" She stopped. She looked at her wrist, at the mark, still gold against her skin in the low light. "He never told me he'd done it," she said. "I found the registration papers in a box after the funeral, with his other careful things. 11 years old. He had filled it out in his good handwriting and had it witnessed by the Valley headman." She looked up from her wrist. "I don't know what he thought would happen, whether he thought about it at all, or whether he just thought, 'You do the form, you send it in, the rest takes care of itself.'" "He was right," I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Yes," she said, "he was right." The iron moon set. The sky outside the northern window was the dark blue of the hour before true dawn, and the stars were still bright, and Veldmore was quiet around us with the specific quiet of a hold that has settled into its night. I told Riva about the pack. Not the formal version, not the census of ranks and bloodlines and territories, the real version. The councils that ran long, the disputes that came back every winter, the 3 territorial agreements that needed renegotiating in the spring, the border villages that had been sending requests for a 3rd supply route for 2 seasons. I told her about Bryn, who was my captain and my closest advisor and who had been waiting without comment for 9 years to see whether I would ever let anyone matter to me. I told her about the senior wolves, who were good wolves and not sycophants, which was rare and worth saying. I told her about the kitchen steward, Petra, who ran the hold's domestic operations with the same precision Vara ran ceremony, and who would be Riva's most useful ally in the first weeks, if she let her be. Riva listened with the careful attention she brought to everything, and asked 2 more questions, and told me that she had managed a supply chain for her valley practice for 5 years, and that she had opinions about how supply chains worked that she would likely air without being asked. Good, I said. She looked at me. I have been king for 11 years, I said, and I have never once had someone in this hold who would air an opinion without being asked. Everyone waits, everyone weighs, everyone considers how I might receive it before they say it. I looked at her. I find I am very tired of that. She was quiet for a moment. You should be careful what you ask for, she said. I know what I am asking for, I said. You told Vara that kneeling for a court that had already decided was a performance for someone else's benefit. You said it in front of the whole hall, without calculating whether it would land correctly. I looked at her steadily. I am asking for that. Whatever that is, the version of you that says the true thing. She held my gaze. That version of me, she said, is the only version. Good, I said. Mara's eyes were closed again. Riva's hand was on her head again, and the fire in the northern wall's iron grate had burned low but had not gone out, and the mark on my wrist was warm in the way that warmth is when it is not an event but a state, not the heat of something igniting, but the steady heat of something that has been lit and intends to remain so. I did not sleep that night. I am not sure Riva did either. We talked through the last hours of the iron moon night and into the pre-dawn, and the hall's fire held, and Mara stayed between us, and by the time the early kitchen sounds began from the lower corridor, the first sounds of the hold beginning its morning, there were things between us that had been said, and things that did not need to be said, because they had already been understood. When the dawn came properly through the northern window, gray and cold and exact, Riva was looking at it with the expression she wore when she was thinking something through. The girl in my practice, she said. Winna. She'll worry if I'm not back in a few days. I'll send a rider this morning, I said. She looked at me. You don't know where Fen Hollow is. I know where the Eastern Valley settlements are, I said, and I know how to send a rider. She considered this. He should tell her it's good news, she said. She'll think of the worst possibilities if he doesn't. I will include that in the instruction, I said. She nodded. She looked at her wrist again, at the mark, which had not faded, which had the settled quality in the dawn light of something that had always been there, and had simply not been visible until now. She turned her wrist so the light caught it, and looked at it the way you look at a thing you are deciding to believe. What happens at the morning council? She said. In 2 hours, I said. Bryn, myself, the 4 senior advisors, the spring territorial agreements. Can I come? I looked at her. I'm not going to sit in the East Wing, she said, waiting to be introduced to people at mealtimes. If I'm going to be useful in this hold, I need to understand how the hold works. I'll sit in the back. I won't say anything today. You will almost certainly say something today, I said. She thought about it. I'll say something useful, she amended. Yes, I said. Come. She looked at me again with the expression that was not quite a smile, and yet always managed to carry the intention of one. Outside the window, the iron moon's last light had entirely given way to the cold, pale light of a Veldmore winter morning, and the hold was waking around us. The morning sounds coming up through the stone, the first doors, the first voices, the particular aliveness of a large working place coming into its day. I stood and offered her my hand, and she took it, and we stood together in the window light, with the fire at our backs and Mara at our feet, and the mark on both our wrists warm in the dawn. I had presided over 9 iron moon ceremonies. For 9 years I had returned to the war table afterward and told myself the next year would be the same, I had believed that with the complete conviction of someone who has stopped expecting a door to open in a wall that no longer seems to have one. What I did not know, in 9 years of sitting in that ceremony chair, is that the door was always there. It was the last name on the list. It was a wolfless orphan from the border valley who had ridden 7 hours through the snow to honor a promise her father had made. It was the woman who looked at the floor they wanted her to kneel on and said no, and meant it, and held the ground. It opened the night she refused to kneel. It has been open ever since. Vara came to me 3 days later with her record book and a proposition. The dismissal procedure, she said, required review. She was not apologetic. Vara was not built for apology. But she was precise, which was better. The review was thorough. The procedure was changed. It is not my best piece of governance, and it is not the change I am most proud of. But I am glad of it the way you are glad of things you should have done sooner and are doing now. Aldrich met Riva on the second morning. They spent 4 hours in the healing hall going through the supply records, and by the end of it he had told her the jar arrangement was not wrong but was improvable, which was his way of saying he was glad she had come. Winna arrived from the valley 12 days later, with 2 bags and the expression of someone who had spent 12 days being quietly very excited and was now trying to moderate that into dignity. She did not entirely succeed. Riva saw her in the courtyard and went to her, and I watched them from the upper corridor window and thought, this is also what it looks like. The spring territorial agreements were concluded with 2 amendments that Riva contributed, one on the second morning and one on the 7th. Bryn, who had sat through 9 years of territorial agreements without comment, said afterward that the amendments were good, and looked at me with the expression of someone who had been waiting to say that for a long time. I did not tell him how long she had been in the hold. He already knew. Mara chose the east corridor window ledge as her morning position, the low stone ledge that catches the first light, and she is there most mornings now, in the light, and sometimes Riva is beside her with a cup of tea and her notes for the day, and sometimes she is not, and Mara is content either way, which is the behavior of a wolf who has finished the long work of her search and is now simply occupying her morning. I walk past that window every day on my way to the council chamber. I do not always stop. I do not need to. The mark on my wrist is warm, the way fires are warm when they are not performing warmth, steady and low and certain, the kind of warmth you do not notice because it is the condition of the room, and the room has always felt like this, and you cannot quite remember when it did not. That is the shape of what happened. A wolfless orphan rode 7 hours through the snow to honor her father's promise, and she stood in my great hall and refused to kneel, and Mara chose her, and the bond found us both, and Veldmore changed, not all at once, not dramatically, but in the way things change when the thing that was missing arrives and simply stays. She is my Luna. She has been my Luna since the night she said no. The pack knows it. Vara knows it. Aldrich knows it. Bryn knows it, and shows it in the way he addresses her in the council chamber, which is with the complete and unsentimental respect he gives to the things he believes in. I know it the way I know the mark on my wrist, constantly, specifically, without the need to perform the knowing. That is enough. It has always been enough. I simply had not met her yet.